The calm elegance of the desert morning at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden was suddenly shattered, not by the crack of a tennis ball, but by a digital shockwave that no one inside the tournament had predicted. At exactly 10 a.m. local time, the moment tickets for Alex Eala's opening match were officially released to the public, the situation changed instantly. Within seconds, the official ticketing portal for the prestigious BNP Paribas Open began experiencing an unprecedented surge of traffic. At first, the website simply slowed down. Then pages began freezing. Checkout screens stalled. And finally, the entire system was pushed to the brink of collapse. According to insiders monitoring the digital infrastructure behind the tournament, servers designed to handle the traffic of championship matches were suddenly overwhelmed by a massive flood of simultaneous requests. The volume of activity was unlike anything the system had processed before. Data analysts later reported that the traffic was coming from across the globe. Huge clusters of connections were traced back to the Philippines, California, and multiple countries across the Middle East, regions where support for Eala has been growing at an astonishing pace. For the engineers and technical teams overseeing the system, the moment quickly turned from surprise into crisis. Emergency protocols were activated. Ticket sales had to be temporarily suspended while technicians scrambled to stabilize the servers and prevent a complete system failure. But what truly stunned observers wasn't just the technical chaos. It was the identity of the player behind it. This wasn't a Grand Slam final. It wasn't a legendary champion returning to the court. It wasn't even a top-seeded superstar. It was the opening round match of a rising young player. And yet that single match was generating a global frenzy. That player was Alex Eala. As the official ticketing platform struggled to recover, the ripple effects quickly spread beyond the tournament's digital systems. With fans unable to purchase seats through the official website, the secondary ticket market exploded almost instantly. Resale platforms began filling with listings for the same tickets that had originally been priced at around $50. But the new prices were staggering. Some listings reportedly climbed to $3,000, even $5,000 for seats inside Stadium 3. Collectors, wealthy spectators, and die-hard fans were suddenly competing against each other in a frantic scramble to secure a place in the stands. For many industry analysts watching the situation unfold, this wasn't simply a sellout. It looked more like a financial shockwave moving through the event. In some cases, the resale value for Eala's first-round appearance was reportedly surpassing ticket prices for later round matches featuring established stars and former champions. The phenomenon had become impossible to ignore. Eventually, the situation escalated to the point where tournament leadership was forced to respond publicly. Executives from the BNP Paribas Open addressed reporters acknowledging that the surge of global interest surrounding Eala had exceeded every internal projection. During the media briefing, one comment from a senior official quickly spread across the internet with a mixture of humor and disbelief. He reportedly told journalists, "We built this event for tennis fans, but we weren't ready for Manila." The line instantly went viral, but behind the humor was a deeper realization spreading across the tennis world. The influence of Alex Eala was no longer confined to the tennis court. Horizon had mobilized a massive international fan base, one powerful enough to overwhelm ticket systems, disrupt markets, and dominate the global conversation around the tournament. For the WTA Tour and the broader tennis industry, this moment marked something significant. Because what was unfolding at Indian Wells was not just excitement around a promising young athlete. It was the emergence of something far larger. The Eala effect, a phenomenon where athletic performance, cultural pride, and digital media combine to create a new kind of global sports star. And if the events of this single morning were any indication, the impact of that effect was only just beginning to be felt. But just when the situation at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden seemed chaotic enough, an even more explosive twist began to surface behind the scenes. Insiders within the tournament started whispering about what was quickly being labeled the VIP box scandal. As the ticketing system struggled under the overwhelming demand, a surprising reality began to emerge. Several high-profile guests, including Hollywood celebrities, corporate executives, and powerful tech figures from Silicon Valley, suddenly discovered that even their elite status couldn't guarantee them a seat. These were individuals who in most years enjoyed automatic access to the most exclusive sections of the BNP Paribas Open. Private lounges, luxury suites, front row courtside seats. But this year, something had changed. For the first time in recent memory, influence alone wasn't enough to get through the doors. According to witnesses inside the venue, the desperation among some wealthy spectators became impossible to ignore. As fans who had successfully secured tickets began arriving at the stadium, a surprising scene unfolded. Elite guests, some of them accustomed to never hearing the word no, reportedly began approaching ticket holders directly. Offers were whispered. Numbers were raised and the amounts being proposed were staggering. One story in particular quickly exploded across social media. A wealthy technology mogul reportedly visiting from Silicon Valley approached a group of fans sitting near the front row. After a brief conversation, he made a jaw-dropping offer. $10,000 for just 2 seats close to the court. For most people, it would have been an easy decision. But what happened next stunned everyone who witnessed it. The fans holding those seats, a passionate group of Filipino supporters, calmly declined the offer. Then they delivered a response that would soon spread across the internet like wildfire. "Our pride isn't for sale." Within hours, the quote was circulating across sports media and social platforms worldwide. That moment captured something deeper than a simple ticket dispute. For these supporters, watching Alex Eala compete wasn't merely about entertainment. It was something far more personal. It represented national pride, identity, a sense of belonging. For one extraordinary moment, observers joked that Indian Wells had temporarily transformed into a small corner of Manila planted in the middle of the California desert. In that moment, devotion carried more value than money. Behind the scenes, however, tournament officials were dealing with a far less romantic reality. Inside the IT command rooms of the BNP Paribas Open, engineers were working under intense pressure. The digital infrastructure supporting the event had already been pushed to its limits earlier in the day. Now, emergency teams were scrambling to reinforce the system before the next wave of ticket demand hit. Servers were being upgraded, traffic was being rerouted, backup protocols were being activated. The concern inside the organization was growing because privately some officials were beginning to ask an unsettling question. What happens if Eala keeps winning? If Alex Eala advanced deeper into the tournament, the digital search surrounding her matches could become even larger. Millions of fans, particularly across Southeast Asia, were already tracking her progress. Every match, every point, every headline. And if she continued progressing through the draw, the demand for tickets, streams, and media coverage could reach levels the tournament had never experienced before. Meanwhile, the confusion surrounding ticket availability began fueling a completely different kind of chaos online. Across social media platforms, frustrated fans demanded explanations. Some claimed that tournament organizers were secretly holding back tickets. Others accused the event of prioritizing corporate sponsors and wealthy guests. A few even began spreading rumors that Filipino supporters were being deliberately limited in their access to seats. But the truth was both simpler and far more revealing. Tournament organizers weren't manipulating the system. They were simply overwhelmed. The global attention surrounding Alex Eala had grown far beyond anything the organizers of the BNP Paribas Open had anticipated. What began as excitement around a rising tennis star had now evolved into something much bigger. A global movement of fans, a digital surge powerful enough to shake the infrastructure of one of the sport's most prestigious tournaments. And if this was only the beginning of the story, the tennis world might not yet be ready for what comes next. As the ticket chaos spiraled further out of control at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, another powerful moment began circulating among fan communities online. According to several reports shared within supporter groups, Alex Eala's team noticed something heartbreaking happening across social media. Thousands of fans were posting screenshots of failed ticket purchases, error messages, frozen checkout pages, and one screen in particular kept appearing again and again. Error 404, tickets unavailable. For many supporters, especially those watching from the Philippines, it felt like watching a historic moment slip away in real time. But then a message reportedly surfaced from someone close to Alex Eala's camp, widely believed to have been shared by her mother, Alex Eala. The note was short, but it carried enormous emotional weight. According to fans who received it, the message read, "We see your struggle. We see your love. Alex is playing for every one of you, even those who cannot get inside the gates. Your spirit is her real stadium." Within minutes, screenshots of the message began spreading across fan pages and sports forums. And something remarkable happened. The anger that had been building among frustrated supporters suddenly began to transform into something else entirely. Devotion. Fans who had spent hours trying to secure tickets started organizing in creative ways. Some supporters began discussing plans to gather outside the stadium instead. One idea quickly went viral across fan communities, bringing battery-powered speakers to the outer areas of the venue so they could cheer from beyond the gates. The goal wasn't protesting. It was support. They wanted their voices, their chants, their cheers, their energy to reach the court so that Alex Eala could hear them even if they weren't inside the stands. For many observers, the moment revealed something extraordinary. Alex Eala was no longer being followed like a typical athlete. She was becoming something much bigger, a symbol. For many Filipino fans around the world, her rise represented pride, identity, and national inspiration. In other words, she wasn't just a tennis player anymore. She had become a national cause inside the professional tennis world. However, this sudden surge of attention was beginning to create serious shockwaves within the offices of the WTA Tour. Analysts and industry insiders were quietly studying the numbers, and the early data was astonishing. Ticket demand surrounding matches involving Alex Eala was beginning to rival and in some cases even exceed the demand normally associated with the world's biggest stars. For experts who had spent years analyzing the economics of tennis popularity, the trend was difficult to ignore. The rise of ELA was beginning to disrupt long-standing expectations about audience attention in the sport. Meanwhile, broadcast partners covering the BNP Paribas Open were also starting to pay very close attention. Early streaming projections suggested that matches involving ELA could attract massive global viewership, particularly from Southeast Asia. Some insiders even suggested that a first-round match featuring her might generate television ratings comparable to later stage matches traditionally dominated by established stars. The implications were enormous. Media executives began quietly discussing the possibility of renegotiating broadcast priorities if the surge continued. Back at the tournament itself, the situation was becoming increasingly chaotic. Organizers attempted to relieve pressure by releasing a new block of seats inside Stadium 1, but the result only triggered another digital storm. According to internal reports, the newly released tickets were added to the system, and within 3 minutes, the servers crashed again. One exhausted IT engineer monitoring the system reportedly summed up the situation with a stunned remark, "We increased the capacity by 400% and they still broke it." At that point, the scale of the phenomenon was impossible to deny. This wasn't just an enthusiastic fan base anymore. It was starting to feel like a force of nature. Meanwhile, inside the player areas of the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, the mood had shifted dramatically. Earlier, rumors of locker room tension had faded. In their place came something else entirely. Silence. Players gathered around screens watching the latest news updates about the stadium move and the global reaction surrounding the young Filipino star. For many of them, the realization was difficult to process. Alex Eala hadn't even stepped onto the court yet. Not a single rally, not a single serve. And yet somehow she had already taken control of the entire conversation surrounding the tournament. In a way few athletes ever manage, she had already claimed Indian Wells before the first ball was struck. And if the reaction so far was any indication, the real storm might only just be beginning. By now, many insiders inside professional tennis were beginning to acknowledge a brutal and uncomfortable truth. Some believed the system had quietly tried to slow her rise. According to analysts, the draw handed to Alex Eala at the BNP Paribas Open was unusually difficult for a young player still establishing herself on the tour. A path filled with experienced opponents. Tough early matches, a schedule that many thought might limit the spotlight around her. But something unexpected happened. Her supporters didn't just follow the tournament. They rewrote its economics. The enormous fan movement behind Eala had turned her into one of the most powerful commercial forces at the event. What began earlier in the week as a ticketing surge was now evolving into something much larger, a full-scale economic shockwave. By Saturday evening, March 7, 2026, the situation had reached another dramatic turning point. While the tournament's IT teams were still struggling to stabilize the online ticketing portal, organizers made a bold emergency decision.